Dearly beloved student, faculty, alumni, Mr. Shpend Ahmeti. I am Ardian Kasaniku, the Secretary of International Law and Relations Club, and we are gathered here today to talk on the topic of good governance and development. Our special guest, Mr. Ahmeti, with a master's in Harvard in public policy, is going to elaborate more on the process of good governance, state building, and development. Without further ado, I would like to pass the word to our prior faculty member, now a second-term mayor of Pristina, Mr. Shpend Ahmeti. Please welcome him.
I think 9 years, huh?
It was 9 or 10, I'm not sure. It's been a long time.
As I said, it's nice to be back. I taught at the UK for 9 years until the day I became mayor. I was teaching foundations of public policy, public speaking as well, so that is what I really love. And also I taught international political economy. As the announcer said about me, I have an undergraduate degree in economics, applied economics and business administration. Then I realized at the end of my studies that that's not really what I like. And I decided to apply to government schools and public policy schools, and then got accepted to the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, where I earned a degree, a master's in public policy with a specialization in economics and political development. So basically how to develop a political system in a way. So what better for a student as myself to be in Kosovo, because you start everything from scratch, and we get what many other people do not get, is to see a country being built from its very foundation, starting from a constitution. Just to compare it to the United States, which is the country with the oldest constitution in the world, 300 years. We're talking about a relatively new country with the foundations, where we're learning what's the role of the parliament, what's the role of a government, what is a parliamentary republic, what is a presidential republic, what is a monarchy as well, because we have monarchies quite a lot, absolute monarchies, constitutional monarchies, more. Approximately half of the European Union countries, if you did not know, are monarchies. Not parliamentary republics, although they have parliaments. They have kings and queens and princes who are the sovereigns of the country and make the final decision about the country. So with that in mind, it was a pleasure for me to go back, or to come back to Kosovo, and started working for the World Bank. Then I said, probably that's not enough. I want to do something more. Started an NGO. At that time I was teaching here at AUK, and then I said it's not enough. I entered into politics. Not enough. I ran for mayor, and then I said it's more than enough. So I need to go back a little bit, because there are quite, how to say, being mayor is probably the most difficult job in politics, especially mayor of the capital, but it's also the most interesting one. There is never a dull moment. Every day is different. Every day there is a different fire to be hot. So it's not, no day is like a same day or a routine. So that is why I love my job, although I would not like to do it for a long time, because it says it's 24 hours a day. You go to sleep thinking about the problems that are in the city. 330,000 people currently living in Pristina, almost 500,000 during the day, 2,200 streets. If every street has only one problem, that's 2,200 problems. And usually there's always some kind of a problem somewhere. And people first think of the municipality and the mayor when they have problems. So municipality is the first place where people get together with an understanding that they're going to live together. So this is, the first political organization is actually the polis, the city, the municipality, and this is how we moved on from organizations as cities to states. And now I think it's going back, because more and more cities are playing a huge role. When I asked the organizers what am I speaking about today, they said you should speak about good governance. It's a favorite topic of mine. and I think it's especially important in a country like ours because of the problems that we have, especially on the perception of corruption, because, and I say perception with a reason, because it's about what people think about their governments and about their institutions. And when you look at the numbers that Transparency International publishes every year, they do a survey. They ask all the people in different countries and they say, do you think that your government or is there corruption in your country? And then they ask a question, have you ever given a bribe to someone for receiving a service? And when you look at those numbers, we rank quite high as Kosovo, or quite low, depending on how you look at it. For example, Denmark is number 1, in the sense that in Denmark people have the lowest perception of corruption, lowest percentage of people who have declared that they have given a bribe to receive a public service, and we are somewhere around the 100th, 90th countries, which means that we are lower than the average. So people in Kosovo believe that there is a perception that the institutions are corrupt, and there is a high percentage of people who have declared that in some point in their life they have paid a bribe. Obviously we compete with other countries on good governance, and what does it mean to have good governance? What is the goal of government in the first place? Why do governments exist? Why do we take it for granted? And this is a question that I've been asking in public policy from day one that I taught, because we are born, then around grade 3, 4, we start now learning educatore, and they tell us that governments are there. But how many of us start asking the question, why do we have governments? How would it be that we don't have governments? Anarchy, we call it. We always think of anarchies in a negative sense, right? Disorder, disorganized. But the question is, when did we agree to say, let's have governments? Let's have elections. Let's have democracy. Let's choose a person or a group of persons to decide on our behalf about our lives. And what is the best system in the world to have that? We say democracy, right? Because we are taught in schools that democracy is the best. But why do we accept that so easily? Why do we agree that my vote should be equal to yours? I have a master's degree, you are still studying. Why should you have the same power as I do in terms of voting? And why shouldn't someone with 17 years old not vote? 17 years and 364 days, you are not mature enough. Then you go to sleep, you wake up the next morning, and suddenly, revelation, you know exactly how this should look like. You know who to vote for. Why don't kids have votes? I have 2 kids. Why doesn't my family get 4 votes? Because we are impacted 4 times as much as someone who has only 1 person. So if you're single, you live alone, you get 1 vote. I have a family, 2 kids. All the government decisions impact my kids as well. But I don't get 4 votes. And when I ask my students, why do you think this is the case? They say, but your kids are 5 years old. Yes, but I make every other decision about them. Why can't I make this decision about them? Why can't I vote for them until they're 18? Because they're people, they're breathing, they're being affected by every policy of the government. So these are the questions that I think every student of politics, public policy, governance should ask themselves. Because now more and more people are saying, well, democracies are good, but is there something better? Is there a system that would produce better results? In the US, they're asking that question now after Trump quite a lot. In the sense, it's democracy. Or Brexit in the UK. Is democracy, majority of people voted. But is that really the best result for the country? And Winston Churchill used to say, democracy is the worst system in the world, except for all the rest. Meaning that, yeah, it has its fallacies, its problems, but at the end of the day, this is the best system that we could think of. And we've had ideas. Don't think that this was just a theory that everyone accepted. There were famous British philosophers who used to say, that we should give votes to people depending on the degree that they have. Someone with PhD should have 5 votes, someone with a master's degree, 3 votes, someone with university, 2 votes, someone who doesn't have education, only 1 vote. Or there are now ideas that you should pass a test before you vote. If you cannot pass that test, you shouldn't vote. If you don't know some basic answers to some basic questions, who are you to vote? Or I always say to my students who love democracy, I say, an 80-year-old woman in a village somewhere in Kosovo doesn't know who the prime minister is, doesn't know who the president is, has no clue about PDK, LDK, and all the political parties that we have in Kosovo, but on election day, they can vote. And usually they vote with no information on public policy, no information on pensions, no information about the consequences of their decisions, but they do it. So is this a fair system? First and foremost, and this is a very interesting and important question that we should ask ourselves in governance. If we assume that democracy is what we have, if we assume that this is the worst system in the world except for all the rest, as Churchill used to say, then what is governance? What does a politician do when they get into office? Should you decide based on what people want, or have you been chosen to make decisions about the people regardless of what they think, because they gave you the right? An example, George Bush, United States President, went to war on Iraq, in 2002, went to war in Iraq with the justification that despite the fact that attack. When people asked him, because they did surveys and said, Mr. President, do you know that majority of people do not want the United States to fight this war? And he said, I was not chosen to decide based on what the majority wants, because of several reasons. And one of the main reasons is that people don't have the same information as I do. I get classified information from CIA, FBI, military. I cannot share those with the people. I know that Saddam Hussein is a risk for the United States. You don't know that, so you cannot make that decision. Hence, I am making this decision for you. Democracy is about this. I am elected to make decisions for you, regardless of what you think, because you gave me the authority and the mandate to do this and that. So he went against what the majority of people said. Move fast forward to United States pulling out of Iraq. George Bush says we made this decision because, according to surveys, majority of people want the United States to move out of Iraq. So now he says, he doesn't say you don't have the information. He says, I've been elected to what the majority of people want. So this is the second question that you need to ask yourselves. And this has been a philosophical question for a long time. Do you always ask the people what they want? Or do you sometimes make decisions about certain things because you were chosen to make them? An example, if we put in a referendum today LGBT rights in Kosovo, I think any vote to legalize same-sex marriage or any other right would not pass. Would not pass. I think in many of the countries, especially in countries like ours, where we have conservative societies, this is a question where people would say no. But in many countries, politicians have made decisions regardless of what the people want, because they say, this is human rights. We don't put this to vote. Nobody has the mandate to vote about somebody else's human rights. We were elected to do this and that or certain things. By the way, our Constitution, if you didn't know, gives the right to same-sex marriage. And our law on the family says a marriage is between a man and a woman. Now, if a same-sex couple decides to get married, they come to the municipality and say, we want to get married, we would have to say no, based on the law. And probably that couple would sue us in constitutional court. And the way I read the Constitution, you cannot discriminate based on sexual orientation. Every right that is given to any other citizen has to be given to all, regardless of ethnicity, race, religion, and sexual orientation. They would probably win the case. But we didn't vote on this, or am I wrong? I don't remember us voting on same-sex marriage or many other things. So second is, are we politicians there to listen to the people all the time, or are we there to make decisions about them? And I move to the question that I have in Kosovo all the time is, how do we improve actually governance? Because we serve in the interest of the people. When you're elected mayor, president, prime minister, and this is I think the problem that we have in Kosovo, we take the office and we think of it as privilege. Now I have authority. Now I have power. I can make decisions about you. You know that, right? I can shut down AUK by closing down the roads. This is our building. We've given it to use to the American University in Kosovo. And the more and more you stay in power, you think, I'm so powerful. What should I do with this power and authority? And actually, that's why we create the systems of checks and balances, to make sure that no person misuses power to the detriment of the people. Now, obviously, a country like the United States has systems in place for a long time, and a country like Kosovo doesn't have the same systems. So, to put it shortly, it's easier to get corrupted in Kosovo than it is in the United States. But you already knew that. I haven't told you something new. Corruption is not genetic. They say the Balkans people, they have a tendency to get corrupted. Albanians, Kosovar, the corruption is in their blood. No, it is not. Corruption is not genetic. There are corrupt people in the United States. There are corrupt people in Europe. There are corrupt people in the Balkans. And yes, surprise, surprise, there are corrupt people in Kosovo. This doesn't mean that we're better or worse than any other nation, because people are almost, I would say, are the same everywhere you go. You have incentives, you have chances, you can be powerful in office. But the question is, have we created systems in Kosovo that prevent us from thinking about getting corrupted? And I used to tell this story in the last campaign that I was running for mayor for re-election. I go to a restaurant on Saturday. I eat with a friend of mine, and the waiter, when I ask the check, he asks, are you paying yourself or are you putting it on the municipality bill? I say myself because it's a Saturday. It's not official business. I am here with a friend. But very important, why are you asking this? I said, because we are used to this. Government representatives paying out of their official budget with receipts. Do you want me to add some more euros to the receipt? And I pay and all these things. So it tells you about the fact that we really did not create the necessary systems to protect ourselves from people. And this doesn't say good or bad, because again, don't understand corruption as a problem of good and bad people. Don't say corrupt people are bad people. It's a consequence, inherent consequence of the system. Imagine a police officer. Kids, salary of about 350 euros. The latest statistics tell us that about 70% of the police force are on bank loans. Credit. Not doing that well, although they have a salary of You know, when you look at all the things more than 400 euros, they have kids. Kids come from school. All the other kids have bought Vans shoes, this, that. You know, they have this. And the pressure starts mounting. And then you stop a car for speeding. You know, the driver says, "Hey, you know, forget about this ticket. Can I give you 10 euros?" It's as easy as that. It's a slip. You can do it. I don't think it's like it cannot happen to you. It can. You're thinking, nobody's looking. You know, I need this. I'm short. It's the end of the month. I have to do this. Understand it as that way. Financial pressures that everybody has. And I'm talking also about the low-level corruption. Although in Kosovo, I would say, we don't have a problem with low-level corruption. It's not the same as in the neighboring countries. You cannot corrupt the police officer so easily for a ticket. But I want you to understand this, that if we think of corruption as a problem of good and bad people, then we are relying on the goodness of the people that we elect. So instead of you thinking Spend is a good or a bad person, and he will be a good or a bad mayor, and I know he's good, and that's why he won't steal our money, I'm telling you that the best way to think about it is say, let's create a system. Let's not rely on him being a good person. Let's make a system that we make sure that he doesn't think about this. Right? And this is what we need to do. And that's why I say, number one, transparency is the most important thing. In the municipality of Pristina, and this is what we did, and this is very important for us, we publish every document that we have. Every document. Including, you can go now online and check all the receipts from all restaurants that we ate or someone in the municipality has put on the municipal bill. And yes, you will have there certain foods sometimes, but I've asked the finance office to publish who was present at the lunch or the dinner, why did we pay for this lunch or dinner, so that we make sure, and this is, and I told people, it's not that I trust or I distrust any of the employers or employees, but when you go to the restaurant on a Saturday, and the waiter asks, do you want it on the municipal bill, or you want to pay it yourself, you're thinking, could this be public? Could this be published? You know, we had these stories about the president eating in restaurants 2 months ago. I think it's out of context, because you cannot pull just one receipt and say he ate calamari and drank wine from our taxes. My question would be not what he ate. Who was in the meeting? Why did you pay for this dinner and lunch? And if it's an official delegation, you cannot tell the Prime Minister of France, we can eat only salad and please make sure that you order this. And you say, what wine do you want? No, we have to do it on the 10 euro side because my government, so we understand that. But at the same time, what we don't want is every lunch that they eat, including the office staff, to be put on the bill of the municipality. And that's how we proceeded with every document. When we did the integrity plan in 2014, which is the first institution to do an integrity plan, we asked ourselves the question, what are the vulnerable spots in our municipality? Permits, lejt. A person who gives a permit has a salary of 400 euros, but he's making a decision about a permit that is worth 10 million euros. Mismatch. Mismatch. Even the best of the best could fall prey to a request that comes because a business person has a building of 10 million euros. You have 400 euros. You have to wait 45 days for a license. Can you speed it up a little bit? So we put triple signatures there. Permits, triple signatures. This needs to be one guy who's doing the permit, second guy who checks it, third guy that needs to sign that everything was okay. On top of it, you need to publish the permit on your website, show the regulatory plan, why this permit was given according to the regulatory plan. Is it the perfect system? Does this make sure that there is not going to be corruption? No, but we've reduced the chances significantly. You know, so transparency, that's why it's important. You have an application today, you can go online, it's Comuna Prištinas, you can check all the spending on your application. Probably about 20 people check it, so it's not a lot. So people usually talk when you don't publish. When you publish, nobody checks it. But just the thought, for myself included, that whatever I spend is made public, I refrain from any bad thoughts I might have about this. Then you put systems in place, and the Parliament is discussing these days several laws that the European Union asked us. One of them is the confiscation of wealth, illegally obtained wealth. If you are a politician, it's 2018, and you have in your declaration of wealth a house, land, 100,000 euros in a bank, this, that. But in 2003, when you were not in politics, you had an apartment that you rented. You need to be Sherlock Holmes to know that there is something wrong with the picture. 2014, I've sent 49 files to the prosecution on the inspectors of construction in the municipality of Pristina. 49 buildings, 10 floors and above, with no permit, with the decision of the municipality that they were going to be brought down, and you would see these 49 buildings existing. And then you see head of the inspection, who drives a 35,000 euro car, bought in 2013, on a 400 euro salary. Mismatch. Nobody asked the question. Sent to the prosecution, investigated, they raided their houses, found about 20,000 euros of cash in almost every apartment, and they got convicted. The most guy got 4.5 years in prison after we sent these files to the prosecution. Now imagine if we had confiscation of wealth, because now the traditional thought, or the thought that we have almost everywhere, is that actually taking your money is more hurtful than putting you in prison. That's why we go for the confiscation of wealth, because they found out that people are ready to go to prison 2 years, 3 years, if they know that after they get out, they will spend the millions that they made while they got corrupt. So when you look, and this comes from Italy, when they fought the mafia, this was the biggest, all the prosecutors who fought the crime, they say, this is when we made the impact, when we started taking houses from the criminals. So someone made a lot of money from drugs. You don't just put them in prison, but you confiscate all the wealth that they have. It changes the game. It changes the game. That's why these laws are important. So first, transparency. Second, make sure that you have a system that confiscates wealth illegally or people cannot explain it. And that's why in Albania they're doing the vetting. Vetting. What is vetting? What they said is every prosecutor and judge will be asked what wealth do they have, and they need to explain how they got their wealth. Half of the people left, resigned, and this is the problem in Albania, because what happened was that, for example, they have an appellate court with 9 judges, and after they did the vetting, 3 resigned before they got to the vetting, 2 did not pass the vetting, and now they are without institutions. Because the judge said, oh, okay, I have some wealth, I cannot explain it. I don't want to be a judge anymore. I'm just going to go. So that's why I think we need to do vetting in Kosovo, not just for judges and prosecutors, but politicians as well. If you cannot explain your wealth that you've obtained in the last 10, 15 years, you shouldn't be in office. You shouldn't be running for anything. You shouldn't be a prosecutor, shouldn't be a judge. Why are we even discussing this? Why are we talking as if this is some sort of a question that needs a philosophical answer? So transparency, making sure that you have the mechanisms in place. And then we have the most difficult one, and that is accountability. And accountability comes in different ways. Obviously, you have legal accountability, you have administrative accountability. For example, me as mayor, I have to report several times a year to the municipal assembly, fight with them, talk, but this isn't accountable. A prime minister has to go to a parliament because the parliament elected them. Every time a member of parliament asks a minister to answer questions, they come there. This is all administrative accountability. What I'm talking about is political accountability. And political accountability is to the people. Did we, and this is a problem that we have, do we punish politicians in elections because of what we know about them? No? No, not at all. It depends on the society standards as well.
Not even in the US.
Now, I would agree now, but when you look at the Me Too movement, which is, again, I know, you have a president meeting different standards, or at least not giving a damn about what people say, but you have senators, including I think the Michigan senator was who resigned in the Me Too movement after a woman accused him of sexual harassment. So that's a different standard that we're talking about. But do we punish people here? Do we punish them for stealing money, for stories about how corrupt they are, for whatever we hear in the media, and then also on moral grounds? Do we punish politicians for being unfaithful to their families? We know for sure about many of them. We've heard stories, but do people actually punish them? I think this is a very important piece of the puzzle. Until we do that, then it's going to be very difficult. So we have standards in place. We publish everything. We will prosecute everyone, but then we also need this to understand that without punishing politicians, democracy doesn't really produce the best results. So if there is one message at the end that I would like to give to you before we open the floor for questions is, please punish and reward politicians based on what they said and what they did. Again, myself included, for whoever is from Pristina, you are supposed to hold to a different standard. Public life is difficult, really difficult. Everything that you do is in the public sphere. People watch what you buy, what you eat, what you do. 2 weeks ago, I went to this Famiglia pizzeria. I was eating with my family a pizza, and then someone says, look at Shvendameti, he ordered the elite pizza. It's 15 euros. He's eating in a restaurant, and then, you know, my kids, my wife, they always like, oh, why do we have to be in the news every day? It's difficult. But you understand that when you run for office. If you don't understand that, you shouldn't run for office. Public office is not a privilege. Public office is a responsibility. You're serving the people. Yes, you can make mistakes, obviously. You make mistakes all the time. But you shouldn't repeat those mistakes. Yes, you are tempted, but you shouldn't, and you should take care of public money more than you do about your private money. That's why we publish everything. That's why we try to do this. But remember what I said at the beginning. Compare Kosovo to the United States, the oldest constitution in the world, the youngest constitution in the world. We're creating a system, but let's make sure that the foundations are there. And by the way, no developed country, how to say, every developed country has incidents in their history that were a little bit shocking at the time that happened, but these were the founding stones of changing things. If you look at the French Republic, we're talking about the Fifth Republic, they changed constitution several times, and always after something happened in the society conflict. This happened, that happened, someone is doing this. For example, now you look at the biggest discussion in Canada today is everybody likes Justin Trudeau. He's good, he's a liberal, he's a leftist, I like him. Yeah, but he went on a trip with a businessman on an island, and he was transported with a helicopter, and it took the Office of Ethics in Canada to tell him, Prime Minister, you shouldn't be doing this. Yes, but it's my friend, and I knew him, and I wanted to get back, and I had to use the helicopter. Bayram Kosumi got back with an airplane from Turkey private charter that was given to him by another politician and a friend of his, because he had to come back quickly because of a visit of a US vice president. But you shouldn't be doing that. Thank you. Questions, discussions, thoughts? I might be wrong what I'm saying.
First of all, thank you very much. Hi, I'm Agnes Ashari and I'm a junior student here. First of all, thank you very much. The lecture was very comprehensive and we can see the sense of you being a professor. It is noticeable.
I like it more than...
Oh, yeah, obviously. Much less responsibility. You did mention and you did talk about a little about the, let's say, voting behaviors here in Kosovo, especially in our society. I'm just quite curious to know, knowing that you previously studied like political science and you just know the science behind it, the social science behind it. What measures can the Kosovo society take to just change this voting behavior? Because we know that people know that elected officials are not necessarily good, and they know that they are prone to, let's say, prone to that bad behavior that you mentioned during your lecture. So what measures can the Kosovo society take to just change these things? Just start from somewhere. Thank you.
It's the last thing that I said. Only if we punish and reward good politics and punish bad politics are we going to get there. But it doesn't change overnight, because then we get into dangerous ideas. I don't like democracy that much, but I agree with Winston Churchill. This is the best that we have. All the other concepts not really worked, and I can show you countless examples of dictatorships and people thinking, and good people, by the way, not talking about necessarily, when you think of dictators, you're thinking only of the worst dictators. So you look, for example, at, I don't know, Greece, 1967, 1973, the junta, the military. They took over because they said the politicians are corrupt. Look at Turkey. After Atatürk proclaimed the Turkish Republic, he then gave a role to the military, that military was supposed to protect the democracy from religious and any other kind of intrusion. So they had several coups. The last one failed, but you had at least 3 different coups that were successful. So what I'm trying to say is, this is the best system that we have. You cannot change this overnight, but it goes to the people. And I say, what now the role of the media in Kosovo have changed, because otherwise the media should have done their part of the story, and not just in Kosovo, everywhere is changing. That's why the role of the media is very important, to tell us how politicians spend their money, to tell us what are the bad and worst consequences, to investigate stories that they have. But today technology has changed the game a little bit, as Trump says all the time, fake news, fake news, fake news. You can get all kinds of information very quickly, 2 or 3 minutes. It's not the time of Watergate, when a US president was brought down because 2 journalists were asking for the tapes of every conversation that was recorded in the White House, because they knew that the president ordered the raid, or 2 thieves to go into the offices of the opposing political party. You don't have that type of investigative journalism today, or it just passes and flashes. So we have to rethink what we need to do to change this. How do we keep the media to its standards, and how do we change voting behavior based on the politicians' record? I think BIRN or several media started to do this before every elections, which I think is good, if they don't have an agenda in their minds, which is to say, this is what the politicians promised, this is what they've accomplished. Remember, because we forget very easily what happened 2 years ago, and we forgive. Kosovar Albanians especially are very forgiving. You don't remember certain stories, people are rehabilitated all the time. It happens in the US as well, but not to this extent that we have here.
Hello. I'm Gelonida, a junior student, and I have a very general question. Which were your main challenges when you took the office, and how did you overcome them?
Oh.
If you did, of course.
The second term, the first term was...
No, it's when you focus too much on theory and you go to practice and you see that it's not the same, then that's the biggest challenge, because politics is about managing people first and foremost. It's about egos. It's not the same as in the private sector. I keep telling my deputy mayor, Selim Pazzoli, it's not like a private business, because he got used to say, you need to do this, finish that. It doesn't work that way. Quite a lot of the things don't change overnight, and that realization is the most difficult thing, that you see that in order to do, I don't know, Christmas lights in the city, you need to start thinking in May, not in September, because there are procurement procedures, and then someone will complain, and you think, but I'm not stealing, I'm just trying to do, and I'm like, doesn't matter. Not all the people are good and with good intentions. So I think this is the biggest challenge. Everything else, problems will always be there. They didn't start with me, they will not end with me. So, I quickly realized that. Cannot solve every problem in Pristina. You have 100 every day. You try to do your best to solve as many as you can. You try to leave this place better than when you found it. But realization that it's not theory is, for me, the worst challenge that I had.
Hi, Mayor, Mr. Mayor. I am Drencheda, a freshman student. I wanted to ask a question.
What's your name?
Dren.
Dren.
I wanted to ask a question about how a good governor should think about the long term of, let's say, the city of Pristina. How do you balance, how does a politician balance his political goals to remain in position as long as possible with the policy goals, which is to have the best city? How do you manage not to think about decisions that will affect the city in 4 years, which is the mandate, but that might affect the city maybe 20 years, long after your mandate is finished?
John Maynard Keynes, in the long run, we're all dead. That's what he used to say. So don't think about the long run too much, because we people don't think that way. Different countries have solved it different ways. In Germany, mayor's terms are about 7 years in several of the cities, to ensure that, because they think that the length of a project or doing something is more than 4 years and you cannot accomplish. It's very difficult. I think one of the best things is to limit the terms. And I like limiting the terms for mayors as well. 2 terms. It's what you couldn't do in 1, you can complete in 2. What you couldn't do in 2, you cannot do in 3. It's, it's an approximate length, and it gives a chance always to other people to do something. In the US, first had an unwritten rule that you cannot be president for more than 2 terms. And then it happened because it was an agreement since George Washington who said 2 terms is enough, and nobody ran. But then Roosevelt, in the World War, decided to do a 3rd, 4th, and then they decided to put a rule that 2 terms is enough. I always think of it this way. Years that don't have elections are the ones that you should do most of the unpopular work. Unpopular work means that you do things that people don't like, but you know that they are necessary to do. For example, we introduced paid parking now, starting in January. People don't like that. It's going to bring order, it's going to solve traffic, but people don't like that. Do it now. Increase property tax. Do it in year 2, don't do it in year 4. Then year 4 becomes more of a campaign. And I like the short campaigns, not the long ones as you have, because then it's all trying to make it look all dandy and nice, and it's not the case. But otherwise, This all depends. I mean, in cities, you have to plan 20 years. We are planning Pristina for 600,000 people. We are planning the infrastructure, and it's beyond my terms. Today, we have an announcement maybe that we get this big art festival, Manifesta, where we applied. We applied for 2022. It's beyond my term. And we do it because we think it's good for the city. But you should also know what are the most requested ministries in Kosovo when they share the pie. It's usually the Ministry of Infrastructure. Not because of the corruption and people think it's tenders and everything else, but it's the most easily seen. I can be a very successful minister. I just go and say, I have asphalt 300 kilometers. You're a minister of health. How do you show results? You're a minister of economy. How do you show results? So politics influences. This is one of the shortcomings of democracy. What you just said. We don't think long term, is my short answer. Kosovo plans 1 year. Although we have the legal requirement to plan for 3 years. We don't plan for 3 years. Just finish this year. Next year, and I think it comes with authority. But I visited Taiwan 2 years ago, just to tell you, Taiwan is a more unrecognized country than we are. About 27 recognizers, but they are the 16th richest economy in the world. And what they do is they have two-party system. Is one party who says we need to have better relations with China, and one party that says, screw China, we don't want to talk to them. What happens is every 4 years or 8 years, they switch. People become tired of one, and let's go to the other, and let's go there. But they have a state agency, which they call the Agency for Development, and they do 50-year plans. And that state agency listens to the campaign for president, listens to what the presidents are promising, and then when they win, they bring them the plan and they say to the president, here is your plan according to your promises, but in line with what we have planned. That's why they get the biggest share of the market for conductors, which are part of microchips. Why? Because in the 1980s, they decided to send 30 engineers to study for conductors and microchips in the United States. They went back, and they have now created the biggest industry. That's how they plan. I asked them, what's the next big thing? Maybe I make some money, because they're planning 50 years. And they said biomedical stuff. Medicine was the big next big thing for them. I don't know. Maybe you think about this. E këshin pasit I var baloni me kush dën mu t'hollu. Biomedicine. And they showed this to me. I said, why are you showing this to me? Am I overweight? But they do this balloon that you can digest, put it in your stomach. It takes half of your stomach. You cannot eat that much. And after 6 months, they take the balloon out. It's this big. They put it inside. They fill it with liquid. And you live with that balloon in your stomach. Instead of going to surgery to reduce your stomach, they do this. And they did this for knees. And they had all these products that they think are going to change the world. Who knows? The balloon was good, by the way. I didn't try it, but obviously.
I'm Rina. I'm a third-year student here. And you spoke a lot about permits of buildings around the city. And one thing that has come to my attention is that there are a lot of buildings built around Pristina. And as a citizen of the city, and I'm sure most citizens, I have a concern because when people come to live here, they will also bring a lot of cars with them. Has the municipality thought of a way to maybe increase parking spaces? And what is the plan for pollution, considering we have a lot of issues with pollution in the past few years?
No, that's a wrong question. Have you thought about parking places? Is to invite cars in the city. But we have to do it. And there are now several books on the topic. We have a strange relationship with cars in Kosovo. I don't know if it's Albanians, but we love our cars quite a lot. We spend more on cars than on our children's education. This is a fact. It's not, that I'm making this up. And also, for example, we get people to pay their property tax by not allowing them to register their car. Do anything else, they don't care. Don't allow them to register cars, they will pay their property tax. So it's a strange relationship, and I think we need to change habits, and this is the most difficult thing in policy. Changing people's habits is really difficult. Last year, on pollution, because now we're going to have the same, it's a problem that I have with our society. We become environmentalists for 2 days because it's fancy, and and then 9 months we don't do anything. I decided to shut down all the roads of Pristina. Again, power, very good. I knew that it's not going to stop pollution. Obviously, 2 days is nothing, 3 days is nothing. You don't stop pollution. Remember the pro-credit fireworks that everybody said, oh, this is pollution? Not true. First of all, there weren't 1,000 kilograms of barut, as they were saying. Second, 1 day fireworks is not pollution. Pollution is when you have a repeated behavior of specific negative externalities that you do, from traffic, from the power plants, from everything else. But I shut down the streets just to see the reaction. Half of them, very good. Some people started realizing they can get to work from Sunny Hill to the center in 11 minutes without a car. Strange, they didn't know, but they used their car. But then we had also the negative reaction. Oh, I cannot get to work. I'm late to work because of you. You've created chaos and this. But I actually think the solution is that. Start closing down some of the main roads in the center. All the best cities that you know today in the world did that. They caused huge reaction, but it's the only way to start thinking. We do parking. Now we're going to do the parking in the cathedral, the underground parking. But that's an invitation to the cars to come to the... That's why you don't do... The mistake was you do the 6-lane road entering the city from Veternik. Huge mistake. First thing that I learned in Harvard, urban planning class, professor was saying, don't do 6 lanes entering the city. Narrow them. Tell the cars, we don't want you in the city. Right? So now we're doing with the mobility plan 5 park and ride parkings in the entrance of the city. Starting next year, you're going to be able to leave your car in the entrance and use that parking ticket for the bus for free to get in the city. We're going to make expensive parking in the center. It's going to be 80 cents an hour average, and you can park only for 2 hours in the center of the city. So if you're not a resident, you cannot work in the government and come leave your car at 7 o'clock in the morning in the center and then leave it until 4 when you leave your job. You can leave it 2 hours. So you have to think about what you're going to do. Better to leave it in the entrance of the city, use the public transportation, than get all the cars in the center as much as possible. Because we cannot expand the roads that we have in the center. We don't have that. The only thing we can do is reduce the cars that are coming in. This is, again, unpopular. People are not going to like it, but we start next year with closing down the George Bush Boulevard, which is from Grand Hotel to the Cathedral. That's going to be closed down. We start closing down next March every Sunday some of the main roads in the city for recreation and sports. And we're going to do that more and more often. And then we're going to see how to close down other streets. Ljubljana is, as you know, several times the European Green Capital. They closed down much of the center. They allow public transportation, like we want to do in George Bush. We want to leave 1 lane for buses, not in asphalt. We want to expand the park, Pre-Faculteit Filologic, to the cathedral, so we make that the central park. Not as big as New York's, but good. Let's take a few more questions.
Hi, thanks for having this discussion with us. You mentioned that there's sometimes exceptionalism when it comes to decision making in terms of democracy. And I was wondering, where do you draw the line? And what are the consequences of those, let's say, authoritarian decisions that are made?
You've asked, I think, the most fundamental question, and it depends on the societies. Some societies it's more acceptable. People think of Putin as dictatorship. Obviously, we think of Russia as not a very democratic society. But if you ask the Russians, that's not the case. And it's just a different mentality of the society. They like leaders, right? Trump is all different from Obama because of the approach that they have. Trump thinks that it's about making decisions. Yeah? Ramush Haradinaj is different from Issa Mustafa because he thinks that you should make decisions, and Issa Mustafa was more about talking and getting. So there are pros and cons of each, but I think as a society, we are more prone to leaders and personalities than we are to democracy, which I don't like, but this is it. We like creating personalities. Ibrahim Rugova, it's all, this in our minds of we create in our minds of being very special people who were there to lead. Obviously, leadership is very important, but it changes from society to society. And that's where you make mistakes, obviously.
Hello, my name is Amira. I'm a sophomore student here, and I have a very simple question. So, as we are a newborn country, and yeah, we don't have experience and things like that, why don't we take examples? Why don't we look up to the other countries that have done better than us, maybe in developing themselves? You mentioned a country that's Taiwan, I guess. Yeah. Why don't we just
we do.
not copy, but...
We do, but that's the problem, because we either copy or we don't take, because obviously we're not reinventing water in Kosovo. 1.7 million people living here is a neighborhood in New York. But we think of ourselves as the center of universe. We think that the US president wakes up in the morning and says what's happening in Kosovo today. So we're not, we can do a lot of things, but we copy-paste it. We probably have the best legislation in the world. Really. We copy-pasted the best legislation. When you look at children's rights in Kosovo, in terms of legislation, I don't think there is any other country who does that. When it comes to implementation, if we paid all the money that entitlements that is given to them by law, we would go bankrupt. We had a VAT draft law discussed in Parliament referring to a coast, Bregdet. And like, why do we have this here? Because it was copy-pasted from Italy and Slovenia. We can learn from other countries, but we cannot have a shortcut to development. And this is what we need to understand. There is no shortcut to the European Union. There is no shortcut to growth. This is hundreds of years of research and numbers. If you read Thomas Piketty's Capital, the famous book, by the way, it's #1 in Amazon in terms of people starting to read it and never finishing the book. Because it's just hundreds of pages. And they tell you that it has never happened in history that a country grows in double digits for a period longer than 5 years. But yet, we believe our politicians who say 200,000 jobs. It's not going to happen. It cannot happen. It's theoretically impossible to create 200,000 jobs in 4 years. But, it happens all the time. So what I'm saying is, if we understand there is no shortcut, this is a process of learning how to ride a bike, then you will fall, but that's the process. Without falling, you're not learning. And I think too many people have held the bike for us. Unmik, K4, this, that, we don't even see the bike. We should fall sometimes. Thank you.